Welcome to the lesson on project management life cycles. We're going to talk about the 5 unique life cycles in project management, including initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and controlling, and the close-up phase. Now let's talk about what project management life cycle is. The project life cycle is the path for your project from start to finish. Each project phase builds toward the subsequent phase and helps to create a structure for your project. The project life cycle is actually the pathway for your project from start to finish. As you'll be aware, project is a unique endeavor, a temporary one that has a start and end date. It's definite. So we have to pass through a unique pathway for us to implement our project from start to finish. So this is looking at the different steps you must carry on pass through for your project to be successfully implemented. What are the different steps involved or the main phases of the project life cycle? One is the project initiation. The project initiation is the first phase of the project lifecycle, which enables you to set up the project from the beginning point. And this is coming up with the project idea, coming up with the project requirements, defining the project, and being able to set the project up for planning. Once we have the project initiated, we need to make a project plan. And the project planning phase is the second phase in the project management lifecycle. Then we have the project execution phase, which is carrying on the project tasks or implementing the project once we have planned it. We need to monitor and control the project, which is the project monitoring and the controlling phase. Lastly, project closure phase. These are the 5 unique life cycles of the project management. So we need to follow these pathways so that the project will be successfully implemented from start to finish. Now let's explore each project life cycle to understand what happens at which phase of the project. Let's look at project initiation, which is the first phase in a project life cycle. During the project initiation phase, we generate the project idea. This is where we come up to identify the problem that we're trying to address. We study the problem and then we come up with the solutions to that particular problem. The initiation phase is the starting point of the project. And this is where we develop everything coming from idea, coming from problem identification, generating ideas, and discussing and engaging stakeholders to gain support so that we can be able to effectively carry on the project. Number one thing we need to look at when it comes to project initiation is defining the project purpose, coming up with the idea of the project. Why is it that we have to implement this project? Why does the project exist? Which problem are we addressing? What is the unique reason for this particular project? So we need to define the project purpose. Every project we implement must have a purpose. It must be contributing. It must be changing, impacting, creating impact for organization, individuals, stakeholders, donors, beneficiaries, and others. So we need to be able to define the project purpose. We need to define the project objectives. What exactly do we want to achieve at the end of this project? What is our overall objective? And what are the different objectives that the project will be able to achieve at the end? What are the desired outcomes? Desired outcomes are the changes that the project will make in the beneficiaries. What is the benefit of this project? Why will this project impact, or what will this project change? Then we need to identify project stakeholders and their interests or requirements. Depending on the sector that you're implementing that project, you will need to identify the key stakeholders within that sector. Take, for instance, you're implementing a health-related project. You need to identify stakeholders, including the Ministry of Health. You need to look at the different hospitals, clinics, nurses, and people who are working within health, organizations that are working within health. Stakeholders are a group of people, individuals, or you can say organizations that have interest in your project. They could be directly involved or indirectly involved. Stakeholders could be donors, they could be partner organizations, they could be individuals, they could be beneficiaries, and even your project team members. So stakeholders are very important when it comes to project because they benefit from the project. They are also involved within the project execution. They support the project. So we need to identify stakeholders at different levels of the project so that we can define their role on what exactly they're going to do, their interests, their requirements, and all that. We need to conduct feasibility study to assess the project's viability. For project to start and be sure that this project will be successful, we need to determine that at the beginning of the project. Remember, every project requires resources, which includes people, money or materials, and then you talk about equipment. We can invest resources into our project if we are not aware that this project will be successful. No one wants to invest into a project that will not be successful. So before we even start the project or we start to put efforts, resources into the project, we need to be clear as to whether this project is going to be successful enough, whether this project is going to be achievable, whether this project is going to be implemented with no, kind of destroying the results, or kind of investing to resources, and at the end of it all, we do not achieve the result. To ensure that we are aware that this project will be successful, even before we start this project, we need to conduct feasibility study. Feasibility study will enable us know the resource requirements for this project and whether we have it. The resource requirement, the people required. Do we have the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise and the experience to carry on this project? Do we have the materials? Do we have the equipment? And what are we going to do to solve this problem? So every problem we see in the environment, which the project is trying to address, has several root causes. We cannot address one problem entirely in a single project. So that is why we need to do a feasibility study to see which part of this problem we can address, considering our resources. Another thing we need to look at is every organization has limited resources. Regardless of the amount you have limited resources. In that, you cannot solve the world's problem alone. You alone or single project cannot address all the problems. That is why we need to be deliberate and intentional about the specific problem we want to address. So in the project initiation phase, this is where we define all these key elements. And then we conduct a feasibility study to determine the resource requirement, to determine the material requirement, to determine the human requirement, to also determine the equipment requirement. We also can do a feasibility study to see the time frame for this project to be successful and the cost required and all the necessary requirements that we need to put in place. At the feasibility study level, we will be able to determine if this project is going to be successful or not. Or we can easily tell if we are able to implement this project or not. That is the importance of conducting a feasibility study. Then we need to develop a project charter after understanding that this project can be implemented and this project can be done. Then we develop a project charter. A project charter is a document that outlines the project goals, the project scope. Project scope is looking at the key project areas. What are we going to cover? The limitation of the project. Now, there is something called scope in and scope out. Scope in is what will the project include? What will the project consider? Scope out is what are we not considering? What are the things we are not going to deliver on? So the project has limitation. The project will deliver on this, but the project will not deliver on this. Take for instance, you're implementing a project to support school-going children. And your project scope will be looking at providing the necessary school materials for these kids to go to school. You may not be able to cover their school fees. You may not be able to cover local transportation for them to go to school, the daily support and all that. But you will be able to provide the necessary school materials for them to go to school. That is the project scope. So you are not going beyond that. The project scope will also be that this project aims to impact at least 50 beneficiaries. That is the project scope. So 50 beneficiaries, maybe disaggregated in terms of male and female, you can define that. Maybe 40% male and then 60% female. That is the project scope. You will work within that limitation to ensure that you achieve your project result. The project charter outlines the project deliverables, the unique achievement point in terms of services and product that the project will contribute. Lastly, you need to develop high-level timeline. You need to create a timeline for your project so that you tell how long this project is going to run for. Is it a 1-year project, 6-month project, 2 years project, 3 years project? And what is the timeline for achieving the different results? After project initiation, we move to project planning. Project planning is a critical point of the project process because we need to outline all the key areas before we can even start the implementation. Number one, we need to create a detailed project plan that breaks down the work into manageable tasks. Project plan is a plan that breaks down the project work into manageable tasks. Now, the project requires several tasks. different things that we need to do, different work we need to do to achieve the project result. We need to reduce or break down the tasks into manageable tasks. One, we need to define the project requirements. What are the requirements for this project? Resource requirements and order. We need to define the project constraints. Constraints could be time constraint, cost constraint, quality constraint, scope constraint, risk constraint. We need to define what is going to be our focus point. And we know what we are looking at and what we are not looking at. Assumptions. Assumptions are external conditions that the project needs to meet in order to be successful, or external conditions that the project needs to be true about in order to be successful. This could be availability of resources. You could be talking about support from the local leaders, the community support. You could be looking at the team members' availability and other resource requirements being available. Then we talk about developing a work breakdown structure, WBS. The work breakdown structure, WBS, is to help us organize and structure project tasks. Remember, project management is the practice of planning, organizing, managing, and completing the project from start to finish. So we need to organize the project in a structural form so that we are able to carry on the project tasks one at a time in terms of how it is structured. The work breakdown structure will enable us break down the work of the project or the tasks of the project into smaller parts. And everyone within the project or on the project team can have a responsibility to implement to ensure maximum success. We need to estimate resource requirements. Resource requirement, look at the people. How many people do we need to work on this project? What are the skills required? What should be their expertise? What knowledge should they bring on the table? What should be their experience level? What could be their qualifications? So we need to think about the human resources for the project. Then we look at the material resources. The material resources, we look at what are the materials we need for this project. Equipment. What equipment do we need to use for this project to be successful? Then we create a resource plan once we've answered these critical questions. We need to establish a project schedule which will include task dependencies and critical pathway analysis. The project schedule is a kind of proper schedule we outline to tell us how we're going to implement this project from start to finish. A popular tool that is used to develop project chart schedule includes the Gantt chart. The Gantt chart is a document or is a software that we use to create a project schedule. And there are other project management tools including Asana, Monday.com, and several other tools that we can use to create a project schedule. Then we need to identify and analyze potential risks and develop a risk management plan. The risk management plan will help us identify all the potential risks that the project will encounter. And then we're able to rate the potential risk in terms of how high it is, medium, and the low risks. After that, we come up with mitigation strategies so that when this happens, what do we do? Then we set up a communication plan to ensure effective information flow among team members and stakeholders. One of the important aspects of project management is communication. It's called project communication management. If we set up a communication plan, this will enable us to communicate and share information, without any barrier among team members and stakeholders. In fact, communication contributes up to 51% of project success. If we don't communicate among team members, among stakeholders, there will be no collaboration. There will be no coordination. There will be no information flowing, and people will not know what to do at what point in time. And it will hinder progress. It will also affect the project when we encounter any barrier or challenge. Then we can create a budget, including the cost estimates, financial resources, and the monitoring mechanisms. So during project planning phase, we need to create a detailed budget, which will outline all the activities, all the different budget line, and the percentage of that budget, and also the allocated cost. We need to do a financial resource plan. Then we create a monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. How are we going to monitor the project? This will include creating an M&E plan. The M&E plan will list all the different activities and the method of monitoring and all the information reporting system and all that. Number three, life cycle of the project management life cycle, phase 3 is project execution. Project execution is where we implement or carry on the project in action. Here we need to implement the project plan by assigning tasks to team members. Remember, we've done our project plan. We've outlined the different tasks. We've scheduled the project. We need to assign tasks to different team members to carry on the project during the execution phase. It's important to provide clear instructions, guidelines, and support to team members during the execution phase. Every team member should be aware of what they need to do. And this includes giving them instructions, guiding them, and supporting them throughout the way. We need to monitor project progress and track the actual work being done. Monitoring is important during project execution. We need to look at what is being done and what is yet to be done, and why are we not doing it. Monitoring will help us track progress and see what is working and what is not working. We can also manage changes and address any issues or obstacles that arise during project execution. Changes could be changes to the timeline, changes to other issues and due to the constraints of the project. It could come from stakeholders, it could be from your internal assessment. We need to conduct regular team meetings and communicate to ensure collaboration and alignment on the project. Team meeting will ensure coordination, information workflow, and also ensure that everyone is updated on what is happening in the project. We need to manage project resources effectively and efficiently, which includes people, materials, and equipment. We need to ensure that adherence to quality standards and project specifications. In the project initiation and planning phases, we already agree on the quality standards, and the donors have already agreed on the acceptance or the quality standard. Then we need to come up with the quality standard in terms of how we're going to control that to ensure we achieve what is in our project document. We need to collect and document project data for monitoring and evaluation purposes. Everything we do on a project, we need to document them. We need to collect data, information, and we document them. So this means that data collection and data management are very important in project execution. This will enable us to have references during monitoring and evaluation purposes. In the event where you have an external evaluator, you are able to provide all the relevant documentations for them to conduct the evaluation. Now let's move to project monitoring and controlling. The project monitoring and controlling phase is a unique phase to help us know what is going right and what is not going right, and we can be able to improve on the project. This includes continuously tracking project activities against the project plan. We need to regularly review our project plan and see what we are doing on ground so to compare. We also need to monitor the project milestones that we have outlined in our project plan. We need to monitor the project timelines. We need to monitor the deliverables to see whether we are achieving or doing what we need to do. We need to compare actual progress with planned progress and also look at identifying any deviations. What we are doing on ground and what is in our project plan, how are we aligning them? So we need to monitor it and compare. We need to assess and manage potential risks by providing or implementing mitigation strategies. Already we've defined a mitigation strategy in our project planning, which is in our risk management plan. So we need to regularly assess and manage project risks to ensure that we are able to handle any risks that will encounter our project. We need to maintain effective communication with stakeholders and provide regular updates. So monitoring and controlling will help us effectively communicate with stakeholders and we regularly update them on the project status. We need to conduct regular project status reviews and adjust the project plan as necessary. Note that the project is adaptable, but it also depends on the kind of project you're implementing. Not every project is easily flexible or adaptable. For instance, if you're implementing a construction project and you have gone to a certain level of the construction work, it's difficult for you to change that particular project. And if you are changing it, there will be loss of resources. You need to monitor and control project costs. Remember, we've developed the budget during the planning phase. We need to control that so that it fits or stay within the budget to complete the project without going into cost constraint. We need to use project management tools and techniques to monitor and control project progress. There are a lot of project management tools, and project management tools are software that we can use to manage projects. These are Gantt charts, for instance, Monday.com, Assigner, Trello, and several other tools that we can use to monitor and control project progress. This will enable us to use technology to monitor project in real time, and we are able to see our status on the project and where we are lacking to improve on it. Lastly, project closure. The project closure phase is the last phase of the project management lifecycle. In this phase, we need to evaluate the project success against the defined objectives. So we have our objectives outlined in the project document, in the project initiation and planning phases. We need to look at what we have achieved at the end of the project against what we intended to achieve, whether they align. Number two, we need to conduct a final project review and document lessons learned. The final project review will be able to know whether we have accomplished all tasks on the project and what lessons can we learn from this project implementation. You will document valuable lessons that could be used for future projects. For instance, if you realize that you had issue with communication during the project implementation, you will need to document that so that the next project, you need to develop a robust communication plan that will improve how you communicate on your project. If you realize that you did very well in managing costs, you need to document that lesson that you were able to effectively and efficiently manage the project costs. And what strategy did you put in place to ensure that your project stay within the budget? That is an important lesson that you can document for the next future, for the next project. There were a lot of risks that you encountered on the project, and you were able to mitigate those risks so that it didn't affect the project on the overall. How did you manage the different project risks? You can document that for future projects. You engage different stakeholders at the community level, donor level, within your team, and at the government level. What strategy did you use to engage all the different stakeholders that you were able to gain their support and they were able to support the project to the finish point? That is an important lesson that you can document for future projects. How were you able to work among yourselves, collaboration, coordination, that you were able to easily carry on the project within time? That is an important lesson you can learn. So there are a lot of things we do. We can learn lessons from our project that will inform us on another project we will be implementing in the future. Also, it will help us know where we need to improve on. During project closure, we need to complete all project deliverables and obtain approval as necessary. Here we need to make sure that everything we needed to do on the project have been done. We also need to know whether we've gained approval from stakeholders. This will require communicating the project results to stakeholders so that they are able to approve it. And then we need to turn over the project outputs or results to the appropriate stakeholders. Take, for instance, you build a hand pump. You need to delegate that to the community so that they can start to use it. You need to close out all contracts with vendors, contract with employees, or whoever that you have contracted on this project. You need to release resources, financial, material, human. You need to perform administrative tasks to close every aspect of the project so that you are able to now move on another endeavor. You need to celebrate project success and recognize the contributions of the project team. Project is not implemented in isolation of a team. So you need to appreciate team or celebrate the success of your team. Again, this is a way of recognizing people. This is a way of planning for the next project. And everyone feels motivated and appreciated in the process. In conclusion, we need to implement project in a structured way. By using these different approaches we mentioned in the project management life cycle, organizations can increase the likelihood of what we call successful project implementation. And you are also able to meet stakeholder expectations and deliver desired outcomes while effectively managing project constraints. I hope you've learned some key lessons about the project lifecycle In summary, we've discussed about project initiation, which has to do with starting a project, developing a project idea, and identifying stakeholders and working on to study about the project to see whether this project is feasible for implementation. The project planning phase is where we develop the project plan, develop the resource plan, communication plan to detail the different tasks we have, when it's going to be implemented, and who is going to do it. The project execution phase where we take on the project by implementing the different plans that we've developed. Also, the monitoring and controlling phase is where we track or monitor the project to see what we are doing well and what we are not doing well, and see what correction we can put in place to improve the project results. The project closure phase where we complete every task, ensure that we've done accordingly, and we agree with stakeholders on the project result, turn over the result to the beneficiaries or the stakeholders, and now celebrate with our team. Thank you very much for completing this lesson.